Hello, this is Matt on the Moon Lambo channel. Here's a post from a popular chart analyst, Macro CRG, with 189,000 followers. He simply wrote, this afternoon, I've seen 50 plus Bitcoin charts comparing current price to the 2021 top this week. And I have to tell you, I have also noticed in my feed a dramatic increase in the number of people who are screaming that the top is in for Bitcoin, XRP, the entire asset class. We're pretty much donezo. Now, I do not believe that is indeed the case. I really do not. And I would even say this. Even if Bitcoin has topped, like, there is no reason to believe that XRP wouldn't rocket to the upside and melt faces. Now, I'm skeptical of this talk about Bitcoin having peaked because there's no market euphoria right now. Like, whenever in crypto has a market cycle ended and people are fearful? No, that's never happened. We've always hit the peak when the market's euphoric and everybody's screaming, hey, the prices are going to go higher. So that would be a very distinct difference in terms of human behavior, which is a major consideration when it comes to trying to figure out where we are at a point in terms of the market cycle. So I don't buy this for a moment, but I'm going to share with you perspectives from a couple individuals who make the case that actually there is a really good chance, and some think a certainty, that the Bitcoin top is in. But if that's the case, why didn't we see it at the peak of a notable parabola? I mean, yeah, we had a $124,000 new all-time high very briefly the other day. Where was the euphoria, though? Where's all the altcoins taking off? Because if it's the end, why isn't money rotating from Bitcoin into all these other coins? Setting alt season into true, very noticeable, moves rockets-wise to the upside. Where is it? Where is all that? I think it should be here if that were the case. But before going further, I do want to be clear, I do not have a financial background of any kind. I am not offering financial advice. And you definitely should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. I'm just an enthusiast who enjoys making YouTube videos about crypto-related topics, but just as a hobby and just for fun. All right, so that post that I read to you was reposted by chart analyst Credible Crypto, one of the best in the space so far as I'm concerned. A well-deserved 475,000 followers for him. And so he looked at this and he just thought it was funny. He is not taking this seriously. And so the early evening he said, LOL, I debunked this 2021 top comparison in a YouTube video about 6 months ago when Bitcoin was trading some $30,000 lower. Now the comparison is coming back again, it seems. This isn't anything like the 2021 top. Context and structure is completely different. Higher, much higher. And even if we pull back a bit deeper here, still higher after Bitcoin. And this is what I'm seeing. So I'll share with you a couple perspectives from reputable chart analysts who think, yeah, Bitcoin's done. That's still a fringe opinion within the group of analysts that I follow. So no doubt we're certainly getting closer to the end of the cycle. But just because we're getting closer, it doesn't mean it's done. And I doubt that we're done here. And I'm not going to read this whole post, but this is a Bitcoin price chart on your screen here from Credible Crypto this afternoon, making an argument as to what he thinks might be probable here. And as you can see, what he's charting here is even if we move downwards or even sideways for a bit, we're still going to rocket upwards to close to $150,000, which is where he thinks it's most probable Bitcoin will peak this cycle. He's been talking about $150,000 for a long time. That would also make sense. That would, even if we just get close to that, the amount of euphoria will be intense. So behaviorally, that would align as well. And you would expect then also people would finally be taking ridiculous profit out of Bitcoin. There would be true rotation into other altcoins, including XRP, and that's where the euphoria comes. All of that would make sense. But I'm just telling you, in terms of how humans are behaving right now, it would make no sense for this to be the peak. If the analysts that are calling this the peak are right, I will look back and I will be shocked. And I will also have to acknowledge this time was different in that regard. But usually saying this time is different, famous last words, my friends. Here's a post from chart analyst Jelly. He says, global liquidity still leads the way to $150,000. Stick to the plan. And as I've been highlighting, Bitcoin directionally does whatever global liquidity is doing, like the vast majority of the time. it hasn't caught up with the peak. If this is the peak for global liquidity, Bitcoin hasn't caught up to it because it lags behind by a few months. So that would also be different. So you're telling me the liquidity, it kept going up, but then right at this moment where it's most crucial, Bitcoin just stops responding. The correlation's broken on the chart. Okay, well, I'm not going to count on that. I'm definitely not counting on that. That's why I keep thinking XRP and everything else is just going to rip to the upside ultimately. Here's a post from on-chain analytics firm Glassnode. This is titled Risk Indicator, Short-Term Holder Cost Basis Model. And they're, of course, talking about Bitcoin here. And they say Bitcoin's average entry price for newer investors and its standard deviation bands help identify overheated zones. $127,000 marks the +1 sigma level in key resistance. A breakout could open the path to $144,000, which is +2 sigma, where prior market tops often trigger increased sell-side pressure. So that's not far off from what many analysts say, citing $150,000 as the likely peak for Bitcoin. And they're just saying, based on historic precedent and how these things unfold, even on-chain analytics firm Glassnode, they're like, yeah, well, there should still be some room to the upside. We're not done yet. It's just data, folks. It's just data, unless this time is different. This is why, again, I'm just skeptical that this is the actual top. Here's a post from Tropic. They're actually, this accounts are run by the two guys that founded Glassnode. They wrote, market makers are moving large amounts of Ethereum and Bitcoin onto exchanges, likely using this short-term market weakness to walk prices down. This is often a shakeout before the next leg higher. Use the pullback to build positions and catch entries you missed in the first leg of the pump. So you can see consistent optimism that the best is yet ahead. Here's a post from on-chain analytics firm Swissblock. Bitcoin Risk Index is the name of this chart. They wrote, as long as risk stays low, and you can see where it is on this chart, low, this is a buy the dip environment. Bitcoin punishes the over-leveraged in the short term, and downside volatility is rising, but structural risk remains contained. Low risk regime equals dips are opportunities. So same perspective from another reputable firm out here. This is not a time to be fearful. Market's not peaked. That's not what's going on here. Here's a post from an analyst I'm not particularly familiar with, Colin Talks Crypto, 79,900 followers, and wrote the following. When will Bitcoin top? Here's an interesting model. Per the chart below, which is the big one on your screen, because when you click on it, it just makes it big. And if we're scrolling through the feed, it displays below. So I'm just mentioning that for anybody that's confused, because I know not all of you are using X, but you should be. Like, it's fun. Like, the XRP community lives there. It's worth being on there just for that. But anyway, so he says, per the chart below, it could be 37 months from the low of the cycle. This is because each cycle appears to lengthen by 4 months. The cycle bottom was around November 22nd of 2022. So, of course, that would be when FTX collapsed. And he says, 37 months from November 22nd, 2022 would be December 22nd, 2025, a Monday. The price per this chart, approximately $200,000. So, I don't know if that $200,000 figure's right. I mean, that seems really ambitious. I'm not considering that as part of my base case based on what I've seen from tons of analysts and historic precedent, so on and so forth. Not that I think it's crazy, but if that's the case, the cycle's not done. And so you had that reposted by Peter Brandt. Peter Brandt is one of the most famous chart analysts in all of crypto. You can see he's got over 805,000 followers. He does suffer from XRP derangement syndrome. You hate to see it. So he's been wrong about everything. Every move on XRP that matters for its entire history, he's wrong because his bias seeps into his analysis. But he has a really high accuracy rate for everything else, where he doesn't have some sort of emotional hatred towards the asset, like Bitcoin. And so he became pretty famous in the world of crypto in 2017 when he accurately called the top, and then he also accurately called the bottom December 15th, 2018, a year later. So he does, like, I admit, like, he's talented. He's got a good hit rate here, just not with XRP. But here he cited that he thinks there's a 30% chance that Bitcoin is topped for this bull market cycle. So he's willing to entertain the concept. He just doesn't think it's remotely probable, but even he will say it's a possibility in his estimation here. And then he says, next stop then back to $60,000 to $70,000 by November 2026. Then next bull thrust to $500,000. So if the peak's in, he's saying a year from now, you're going to see Bitcoin worth about half of what it is right now. And I don't know where Bitcoin's going to bottom, but substantially lower than where it is now. That just seems obvious, you know. But again, he doesn't think that's probable. I'm just showing you examples of even people that will entertain it. Here's a post from Crypto Wizard, Bitcoin price chart here. He says, not over yet. In 2013, the bear market lasted 396 days after Bitcoin had a 1,034-day bull. In 2018, the bear market lasted 396 days after Bitcoin had a 1,035-day bull. In 2022, the bear market lasted 395 days. The bull is nearing the end, but it's not done yet. And so you can see on the chart, he's citing that there's more room for it to go upward. He just doesn't think this is done yet. And that's the vast majority of what I'm finding from the analysts that I follow. Here's another one from Crypto Wizard. He says, path is written. You got Bitcoin up top, and this is total 2 on the bottom, so everything excluding Bitcoin. He says, Bitcoin comes first, and then total 2 looks identical to Bitcoin before its parabolic breakout and rally to new highs. Strap in, your alts are about to fly. And that's another perspective that I keep seeing, and I've been highlighting it, especially in recent days, because that's been increasing from the analysts that I follow. Here's a post from chart analyst X-Force Global. He says, XRP still well on track, but be mindful of a lower level possibility. So he thinks there's an 80% chance from here we go higher, and ultimately double-digit price action. And in the short term, he's saying 20% chance we go lower. So that's in line with what Credible Crypto's warning. It's possible we go lower, but even if we do, it doesn't matter. We're still going higher after that. The cycle's not over. Here's a post from chart analyst Casey Trades, and she does think the top is in. She says here, the Bitcoin top is in, capital rotation on deck. Bitcoin has likely reached its macro top and is now primed for a major correction. The ultimate macro target for the end of this correction is near $60,000, right at the golden 618 retracement, but that's a long-term projection. In the near term, I'm tracking the formation of wave A of the larger ABC correction. Wave A target, $77,000 macro 382 retracement. This move should happen in 5 waves down, and the subwave measures are absolutely perfection in this future mapping. Wave A roadmap, wave 1 would be down to 112,000, wave 2 up to 120 to 122,000, large caps take off, and then wave 3 down to $89,000 in subwaves. Expect midpoint reaction around 100K as part of the wave 3 drop. And so let's pause and note, even then, if she's right about this and Bitcoin's done, she's still acknowledging, yeah, but alts are going to take off. So it would be different than last cycle and this cycle in that the human behavior, the euphoria, it's not lining up. If she ends up being correct about this, credit where it's due, if so. But the human behavior definitely does not align with what we've seen in the past, if that's the case. It says wave 4, retest break of $100,000, wave 5, $77,000, bottom of wave A. So if this plays out, we could finally be on the verge of the long-awaited capital rotation out of Bitcoin and into large caps. Bitcoin tags $112,000 for completion of wave 1 of A, and while it's busy grinding up into for wave 2, topping somewhere between $120,000 to $122,000 zone, the large caps explode into fresh all-time highs. So given that, I think pretty much all of us here are here not for Bitcoin at this point, but we're here to make life-changing wealth in alts. Even if this more bearish sounding scenario is correct and the top for Bitcoin is in, we still get our life-changing wealth even in this scenario. So I don't believe for a moment that people are not going to rotate and be greedy and take their profits out of Bitcoin and put it into other stuff. Why would humans on the whole just suddenly behave differently? No, we don't want that extra profit. Yeah, right. You greedy sons of bitches, you know you're going to do it. Come on. But I'm expecting, like, I'm here for that. I'm counting on humans. You know, I think people are going to people. I'm counting on humans to act like humans still. Why would that change? It just doesn't make sense to think that it would change. So the best is yet ahead. I'm not a financial advisor. You should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. That would be a very, very, very bad idea. Until next time, to the moon, Lambo.